The day my husband passed away should have been filled with mourning and reflection, but it turned into humiliation. My son, Brandon, assumed the role of CEO in our family company immediately, and during his first board meeting, looked straight at me and said, "Time to cut the dead weight, starting with mother." Laughter erupted around the room. Shock, betrayal, and rage collided inside me, but I didn't respond. Instead, I walked out, leaving behind everything familiar, traveling 3,000 miles to a new city with nothing but determination. I worked tirelessly, facing obstacles, building connections, and eventually creating a thriving business empire from scratch. Years later, at the grand opening of my company's flagship office, a familiar face appeared, Brandon, assuming he could join as my partner. He didn't realize that the woman he had belittled was now the one in control, holding all the power. The look on his face when he realized the truth was priceless. My name is Margaret Lawson, and I'm 62 years old. The day of my husband's funeral, I thought I would be met with sympathy and support, but the first board meeting after his passing shattered that expectation. Dressed in muted black, I entered the boardroom with a heavy heart, hoping to honor my husband's legacy while maintaining dignity. The room was tense, filled with familiar faces, yet I sensed a shift in energy I hadn't expected. Brandon, my eldest son, had assumed control, and his eyes burned with a mixture of confidence and disregard. The air seemed colder, the conversations clipped, and the chairs felt as if they were closing in. I took a deep breath, determined to maintain composure, unaware that this meeting would mark the beginning of a betrayal that would force me to rebuild my life from scratch. As the meeting began, Brandon cleared his throat, exuding an air of superiority. He casually announced he was now the CEO of the family company, pausing as all eyes turned to me. Then came the words that cut deeper than grief. "It's time to cut the dead weight, starting with mother." The room erupted in laughter. Shock anchored me to my chair, disbelief threatening to choke my voice. Pain, humiliation, and rage collided inside me. My son, the person I had nurtured and trusted, had just dismissed me publicly in front of colleagues, clients, and friends. Every chuckle from the board members felt like a betrayal compounded. I clenched my fists under the table, struggling to hold back tears and anger. In that moment, the harsh truth crystallized. My own son viewed me as expendable, and the life I had known would never be the same. The laughter echoed in my ears, surreal and stinging. Faces I had once trusted now smiled as if my humiliation was entertaining. Every chuckle, every smirk made my blood boil, yet I forced myself to remain calm. I could feel the weight of years of loyalty, support, and devotion crumbling into contemptuous amusement. The room seemed distant, the laughter almost muffled, as a strange clarity washed over me. I could either break under the insult or use it as fuel for something greater. My heart raced, pulse quickened, but a flicker of resolve sparked within me. The betrayal was complete, yet the embers of determination glowed brighter. I realized that this room, these people, and even my son's mockery were no longer anchors. They were the catalyst for a life-changing decision that would soon reshape my future entirely. As the meeting dragged on, I struggled to process the mixture of emotions flooding me. Anger surged first, sharp and consuming, at the audacity of Brandon's words and the board's laughter. Disbelief followed. How could my own son dismiss me so publicly, so cruelly? Hurt settled deep in my chest, a quiet ache alongside the louder storms of rage. I had dedicated decades to this company, my family, and the legacy of my late husband, yet it seemed inconsequential in the face of ambition and disrespect. Thoughts collided. Should I fight for my place? Should I walk away? The turmoil threatened to overwhelm me, but beneath the chaos, a seed of determination took root. I knew that the path forward would require courage, independence, and a willingness to leave everything familiar behind to reclaim dignity and power on my own terms. By the end of the meeting, the decision crystallized in my mind. I could no longer remain in a place where I was disrespected and undervalued. The humiliation had become a turning point, a stark indicator that my worth could not be dictated by others, even my own family. I realized I had to leave behind the city, the company, and the life I had built with my husband. Though the thought of starting over at 62 was terrifying, I embraced it with quiet resolve. Packing my determination alongside essentials, I decided to travel thousands of miles away to forge a new life that would allow me to regain autonomy, dignity, and the power that had been stripped from me. This choice was not surrender, it was the first step toward empowerment. Leaving was bittersweet. I walked through the hallways of the house I had shared with my husband, memories etched into every corner. Friends and colleagues expressed sympathy, yet I felt the weight of the boardroom betrayal lingering. Saying goodbye to familiar streets, local cafes, and the comfort of my old life was painful, but I embraced the journey ahead with determination. Every hug, every whispered farewell, reminded me of what I had lost and what I hoped to regain. Driving past the office one last time, I felt a mixture of grief and liberation. The city that once symbolized stability now represented constraint and disrespect. Turning my back, I stepped toward freedom, toward reinvention, carrying nothing but hope, resilience, and the certainty that my next chapter would belong entirely to me. Margaret's heart raced as she zipped her suitcase, each item symbolic of the life she was leaving behind. With essentials packed and a few sentimental mementos tucked safely inside, she closed the door to her old life for the last time. At the airport, the roar of planes and the bustle of strangers contrasted sharply with the quiet tension of the boardroom betrayal. As she boarded the plane for a city 3,000 miles away, uncertainty mingled with exhilaration. Margaret knew nothing about what awaited her, only that she was taking control, forging a path fueled by independence, intelligence, and determination. The hum of the engines beneath her feet felt like a heartbeat of possibility. As the plane lifted off, Margaret glanced at the shrinking skyline, silently vowing she would build an empire, and those who had mocked her would never forget the woman they dismissed as dead weight. Margaret stepped off the plane, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The unfamiliar skyline stretched before her, a world of opportunity and challenge, 3,000 miles from everything she had ever known. She felt a pang of homesickness but pushed it aside, focusing instead on determination. Every step on the crowded streets reminded her that she was invisible here. No one knew her, no one doubted her, and no one could judge her. Overwhelmed by the scale of the city and the unknown ahead, she paused to breathe, centering herself. This was a new beginning, a blank canvas for her intelligence, resilience, and vision. Margaret's mind raced with possibilities, each idea a seed for a future empire. Despite uncertainty, she felt a surge of freedom. The chains of the past had been broken, and she was ready to build a life entirely her own. Margaret found a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, small but functional enough to serve as her new base. The space was simple, a stark contrast to the luxury she had left behind, yet it symbolized independence and self-reliance. Unpacking her few belongings, she created a corner as her workspace, a place to map out goals and strategies. Margaret wrote a list of ambitions: research industries, build contacts, save capital, and slowly establish her presence. The modest surroundings reminded her that success would come through hard work, persistence, and creativity, not shortcuts. Each evening, she reviewed her plans, visualizing milestones and setbacks, preparing mentally for challenges ahead. Though the apartment lacked glamour, it embodied potential. A starting point for rebuilding her life, reclaiming power, and proving to herself and everyone who had doubted her that she was far from dead weight. Margaret spent her days walking the streets of the city, exploring businesses, observing trends, and analyzing gaps in the market. Cafes, boutiques, and service shops became classrooms for observation. She asked subtle questions, noted customer behaviors, and evaluated competitors' strengths and weaknesses. Margaret met shopkeepers, managers, and locals, carefully assessing who could provide insight or potential collaboration. Every interaction, from a casual chat to a brief handshake, contributed to her growing knowledge of the local economy. Even though the city was vast and unfamiliar, she felt energized by the endless opportunities waiting to be seized. Margaret visualized how her own venture could stand out, filling niches neglected by others. This exploration was not idle wandering, it was strategic reconnaissance, laying the foundation for her eventual empire. Each day, she absorbed lessons, sharpened her instincts, and fueled her determination to succeed. Margaret quickly learned that starting over would not be easy. She faced setbacks that tested her resilience: business permits delayed, investment opportunities rejected, and initial ideas faltering against fierce competition. Each failure stung, echoing the humiliation she had left behind, but she refused to succumb to despair. Instead, she analyzed each obstacle, asking herself what could be learned and how strategies could be adapted. Long hours were spent revising plans, contacting mentors, and revisiting failed proposals. The city, once intimidating, became a proving ground, forcing her to rely on ingenuity, patience, and tenacity. Every challenge she overcame reinforced her confidence, turning frustration into fuel for persistence. Margaret realized that these early failures were not signs of inadequacy, but essential lessons, shaping her vision and fortifying her determination to build an empire that would one day eclipse the world she had left behind. Understanding the value of guidance, Margaret sought mentors and potential partners who could provide insight, advice, and collaboration. She attended local business events, workshops, and networking gatherings, observing seasoned entrepreneurs and learning from their successes and mistakes. Every conversation was carefully considered, questions posed subtly, impressions measured, and trust earned gradually. Margaret recognized that her age and experience gave her a unique perspective, often impressing younger professionals who underestimated her initial presence. Relationships formed through patience and authenticity, creating a network she could rely on when launching ventures. Each mentor meeting offered knowledge, each potential partner a new possibility. Margaret's intelligence, humility, and strategic thinking turned these encounters into stepping stones, ensuring that when the time came, she would have a strong, reliable foundation upon which to build her empire. Margaret dedicated herself to mastering skills critical for her new venture. She enrolled in short courses, read extensively, and spent long nights practicing strategic planning, finance management, and marketing insights. Each lesson she absorbed became a tool to outmaneuver competitors and navigate complex business landscapes. Mistakes were embraced as opportunities to refine her approach, turning setbacks into practical knowledge. Margaret also experimented with innovative strategies, testing concepts in small, controlled ways before scaling them. Her prior experience gave her confidence, but she recognized that this city demanded adaptability and modern acumen. By combining wisdom with fresh skills, she forged a unique approach to business, pragmatic, informed, and resilient. Slowly, her confidence grew, her vision sharpened, and the blueprint of an empire began to take shape, fueled by determination, intelligence, and relentless dedication. Weeks turned into months, and Margaret's efforts began to bear fruit. She secured her first small contracts, gained loyal clients, and built a trustworthy team of employees who shared her vision. Every successful project reinforced her reputation as a competent, innovative entrepreneur. Margaret meticulously documented each success and setback, analyzing what worked and refining future strategies. Small wins accumulated into tangible results, creating momentum for larger opportunities. The modest apartment now felt like a command center, a place where ambition transformed into action. Margaret visualized the empire she was constructing, one built on integrity, intelligence, and resilience. Though the city was still foreign, she felt at home in her purpose, confident that her patience, strategy, and tireless effort would one day result in a thriving business empire that would not only surpass expectations, but also demonstrate to her son the power of perseverance and self belief. Margaret launched her first small venture with a mix of excitement and nerves, knowing this was her first real step toward independence. She invested her modest savings into a boutique consultancy specializing in local businesses, applying the strategies she had meticulously learned over months. Early challenges included limited recognition, skeptical clients, and unpredictable cash flow, yet each project she completed brought small victories. Her attention to detail, professionalism, and relentless work ethic impressed early clients, earning referrals and building credibility. Margaret's modest office became a hub of energy and innovation, reflecting her vision and determination. Each success, no matter how minor, felt monumental, a confirmation that leaving her old life behind had been the right decision. The foundation of her empire was solidifying, built on skill, persistence, and an unwavering belief that she could succeed against all odds. As Margaret's first projects gained traction, she realized she needed a reliable team to scale operations. She carefully selected staff members who shared her vision, prioritizing integrity, intelligence, and adaptability. Each hire was a reflection of her strategic mindset, capable, trustworthy, and aligned with her ambitious goals. Margaret fostered a collaborative, motivating culture blending mentorship with accountability. She encouraged innovation, allowing team members to contribute ideas while instilling discipline and focus. Regular meetings became a space for strategy, problem solving, and celebrating small wins, cultivating loyalty and commitment. Margaret's leadership was firm but empowering, earning respect through competence rather than authority alone. This strong team culture became the backbone of her growing enterprise, enabling her to tackle larger projects, maintain quality, and prepare for the future empire she envisioned. With a dependable team in place, Margaret began pursuing larger, more ambitious projects. She leveraged her growing reputation, negotiating contracts that demanded higher stakes and greater visibility. Each new venture required meticulous planning, risk assessment, and strategic execution. Early missteps were learning opportunities, strengthening her ability to anticipate challenges and pivot quickly. Margaret's leadership became increasingly confident. She guided her team through complex negotiations, deadlines, and client demands with calm precision. The expansion brought financial growth, increased recognition, and a sense of legitimacy. Each completed project not only enhanced her portfolio, but also reinforced her authority and credibility in the business community. Margaret was no longer starting over. She was actively building an empire, one carefully managed and strategically expanded venture at a time. Margaret quickly learned that building an empire meant facing fierce competitors and unpredictable market conditions. Rival businesses attempted to undercut her pricing, poach clients, and challenge her reputation. Margaret met each obstacle with strategic insight, analyzing competitors' weaknesses and turning challenges into opportunities. She implemented innovative marketing campaigns, cultivated strong client relationships, and maintained an unwavering commitment to quality. Stressful moments tested her patience, resilience, and leadership, yet Margaret thrived under pressure, using adversity to refine her strategies and improve operations. Each challenge conquered strengthened her confidence and the loyalty of her team. By confronting competition head on, she not only protected her growing empire, but also demonstrated that intelligence, adaptability, and determination could outmaneuver even the most aggressive rivals. Margaret understood that to dominate the market, she needed to innovate constantly. She invested in research, gathered customer feedback, and encouraged her team to brainstorm creative solutions. New services, unique offerings, and tailored products distinguished her brand from competitors. Margaret carefully monitored trends, integrating modern technologies and design principles to enhance client satisfaction. Each innovation was tested and refined, balancing risk with calculated strategy. The results were impressive. Clients noticed the attention to detail, uniqueness, and forward thinking approach. Margaret's empire began to gain a reputation for creativity, reliability, and excellence. Through innovation, she not only carved out a niche, but also created sustainable growth, reinforcing her position as a visionary leader who could turn challenges into opportunities and transform ambition into tangible results. Rather than spending her growing profits on luxury or comfort, Margaret reinvested every surplus into expanding operations, improving infrastructure, and developing her team. She funded new marketing campaigns, enhanced technology, and created specialized training programs to maintain high quality services. Each reinvestment was strategic, aimed at scalability and long term sustainability. Margaret's careful financial planning ensured that growth was steady, measurable, and resilient to market fluctuations. She monitored expenditures meticulously, balancing risk with opportunity while maintaining control over all aspects of the business. By prioritizing reinvestment over short term gratification, Margaret solidified the foundation of her empire. Her careful stewardship demonstrated wisdom, foresight, and a relentless commitment to building a legacy that could withstand challenges, grow exponentially, and eventually surpass the world she had left behind. As her enterprise flourished, Margaret set her sights on a flagship office, a symbol of her hard won success. Every detail of the launch was planned meticulously: location, design, staff readiness, publicity, and client invitations. Margaret envisioned the office as a statement of resilience, intelligence, and independence. The launch would not only showcase her business achievements, but also mark a personal triumph over betrayal. Months of preparation, coordination, and refinement culminated in this moment. She rehearsed speeches, final walkthroughs, and visual presentations, ensuring perfection. This flagship office represented the apex of her journey from humiliation to empowerment, a tangible testament to her strategy, persistence, and leadership. Margaret was ready to unveil her empire to the world, confident that her hard work, vision, and determination had transformed her life completely. Margaret meticulously prepared invitations for her flagship office's grand opening, sending them to press, industry leaders, and key influencers. Every detail mattered: elegant stationery, personalized messages, and strategic timing to ensure maximum impact. She envisioned the day as a public declaration of her transformation, from a dismissed dead weight to a formidable business leader. Anticipation swirled in her chest as she imagined influential guests walking through her doors, experiencing firsthand the empire she had built from scratch. Each RSVP felt like validation of her journey and a testament to her perseverance. Margaret understood that appearances mattered almost as much as accomplishments. The event would cement her authority, inspire respect, and silently announce to anyone who had doubted her, including Brandon, that she was now fully in control of her destiny. In quiet moments before the grand opening, Margaret reflected on the path that had brought her here. She remembered the crushing humiliation of Brandon's boardroom insult, the laughter that had once pierced her heart, and the overwhelming fear of starting anew at 62. Each setback, each lonely night, and every obstacle had been a lesson in resilience and strategy. Margaret's mind traced the months of hard work, the failures that refined her skills, and the victories that built her confidence. She felt pride swell in her chest. She had taken betrayal and transformed it into empowerment. Every detail of her empire, from her skilled team to her innovative business strategies, was a testament to her intelligence, patience, and determination. Margaret knew that this day would be remembered not just for the grand opening, but for the triumph of willpower over humiliation. As word of the grand opening spread, media outlets began showing interest. Reporters arrived early, cameras ready, eager to capture Margaret's story of resilience and transformation. Interviews focused on her journey, highlighting the adversity she overcame and the empire she had built from nothing. Margaret spoke with poise and confidence, narrating her rise without bitterness, emphasizing determination and strategy rather than revenge. Social media buzzed with admiration and inspiration, amplifying her influence beyond the local community. The attention created a ripple effect, drawing potential clients, collaborators, and investors who recognized her talent and vision. Margaret realized that her personal triumph had become a public spectacle of empowerment. The media attention wasn't just publicity, it was a validation of her strategy, endurance, and ability to turn humiliation into undeniable power. Margaret's team, who had shared every challenge and success, gathered to celebrate milestones achieved in preparation for the grand opening. Laughter, cheers, and toasts filled the air as they acknowledged the hard work and dedication that had made the empire possible. Margaret watched with pride, recognizing that her careful hiring, mentoring, and leadership had created not just a company, but a loyal and motivated family of professionals. Every employee understood her vision, respected her authority, and felt ownership of the success they had collectively built. Margaret reflected on how this culture of collaboration and empowerment had become a core pillar of her empire. The celebrations weren't just about accomplishments. They were symbolic of transformation, demonstrating that triumph was built not alone, but through strategic alliances, trust, and shared ambition. On the day of the opening, Margaret was honored with awards recognizing her achievements as an entrepreneur, leader, and innovator. Industry peers praised her ability to rebuild from adversity, emphasizing her intelligence, foresight, and perseverance. Margaret received each accolade with grace, acknowledging her team while subtly asserting her authority. Cameras flashed, guests applauded, and social media coverage captured the moment, spreading her story to a wider audience. These recognitions were more than ceremonial, they were public validation of a journey that had begun with humiliation and betrayal. Every handshake, every congratulatory word, reinforced her triumph over the challenges she had faced. Margaret's empire was no longer a personal victory alone. It had become a recognized symbol of resilience, empowerment, and strategic brilliance in the professional world. Margaret's assistant discreetly informed her that Brandon had called, hinting at his plan to attend the grand opening uninvited. A flicker of anticipation mixed with amusement crossed her face. This was the moment she had mentally prepared for, the opportunity to confront the son who had once humiliated her. Margaret assessed the situation calmly, considering timing, positioning, and the psychological impact of his arrival. She understood that this encounter could either disrupt the event or become a dramatic testament to her empowerment. The knowledge of his plan only strengthened her resolve, reminding her how far she had come. Margaret's mind ran through scenarios, deciding the best way to assert authority, expose arrogance, and maintain control, ensuring that her empire and her dignity would remain untouchable. Margaret took a moment alone in her office, centering herself before the anticipated confrontation. She reviewed the plan meticulously, greet Brandon with polite calm, allow him to reveal his assumptions, and then strategically dismantle his overconfidence through facts, achievements, and public recognition. She visualized every expression, every word, every reaction, preparing to turn the encounter into a controlled display of empowerment. This was not about revenge but demonstration, proof that she had risen above betrayal and claimed mastery over her life. Margaret's mental preparation was precise. She focused on composure, confidence, and clarity. As the sounds of arriving guests filled the room, she exhaled deeply, ready to face Brandon, transform tension into triumph, and showcase that the woman he once dismissed as dead weight now held all the power in the room. Don't miss how Margaret turns the tables on her son. Hit like and subscribe now, because the moment of her ultimate victory is about to happen. Brandon walked into the grand opening with a confident stride, assuming he could charm his way into Margaret's new empire as a partner. He wore his usual smirk, oblivious to the power shift that had taken place over the past years. The press, guests, and staff subtly noticed his overconfidence, unaware of the story behind it. Margaret observed from across the room, her calm composure unshakable, as she watched the son who had once humiliated her now step into a space where she held all authority. Brandon's assumptions made him blind to the reality. The woman he dismissed as dead weight had built an empire that outshone everything he had known. Every step he took toward her podium, every glance he cast, was a reminder that the tables had turned, and Margaret was ready to seize the moment with precision and power. Margaret approached Brandon with a measured smile, her posture straight and eyes steady. She greeted him warmly, but her tone carried unmistakable authority. Brandon, it's been a while, she said, voice calm yet firm, signaling that she controlled the interaction. The contrast between her composed demeanor and his cocky expectation immediately caught the attention of the guests. Brandon's smirk faltered slightly as he realized she was no longer the passive figure he had underestimated. Margaret subtly highlighted her presence. She was confident, unshaken, and clearly in control of both the room and the conversation. Every word, every gesture, conveyed mastery and experience, a reminder that power was not inherited but earned. Guests sensed the shift in energy as Margaret established dominance not through anger, but through quiet, undeniable authority, setting the stage for the revelation to come. Brandon attempted his usual charm offensive, talking over Margaret with casual confidence, hoping to negotiate a role in her company. He offered suggestions, assumptions, and even jokes, expecting agreement or at least indulgence. But Margaret listened calmly, interjecting only when necessary, her words precise and measured. She subtly referenced achievements, numbers, and strategies that highlighted her competence while leaving him speechless. Every attempt to impress was quietly deflected by her intelligence and authority. The guests, initially oblivious, began noticing his discomfort as his words lost impact. Brandon's overconfidence collided with Margaret's strategic calm, revealing the stark contrast between arrogance and earned authority. Each failed attempt to charm or negotiate chipped away at his confidence, illustrating that the woman he had dismissed was now untouchable, in complete control, and fully capable of turning his assumptions into public lessons about humility. Margaret paused, commanding attention, and began recounting the infamous boardroom incident where Brandon had labeled her dead weight. Her voice remained calm, but the gravity of her words resonated throughout the room. Guests, staff, and even media present leaned in, captivated by the story of betrayal transformed into triumph. Margaret highlighted the laughter, the dismissive attitudes, and the utter lack of respect she had endured, framing the narrative as a lesson in resilience and strategy. Brandon's face went pale. He realized his arrogance and cruelty were now exposed in front of a crowd that had only just begun to understand the full story. Every word Margaret spoke reinforced her intelligence, authority, and power, turning past humiliation into a dramatic public reckoning. The moment was both cathartic and theatrical, leaving no doubt that the tables had completely turned. Margaret guided Brandon through a visual presentation of her empire, showcasing major contracts, office expansions, press coverage, and innovations. She detailed client satisfaction, financial growth, and the loyal, capable team that supported her leadership. Each slide, each statistic, and each story emphasized the stark contrast between her accomplishments and his assumptions of entitlement. Brandon struggled to maintain composure as the magnitude of her success sank in. He had underestimated her drive, intelligence, and ability to thrive independently. Margaret's calm explanation and subtle pride created an overwhelming impression, proving that she had turned betrayal into unmatched achievement. Guests murmured admiration, further amplifying the impact. Brandon, once confident and dismissive, now felt exposed, humbled, and entirely aware of the distance Margaret had traveled since his cruel words. Her empire was living proof that resilience, strategy, and patience could turn humiliation into triumph. Brandon's attempts to regain composure faltered as Margaret subtly indicated the roles available or unavailable to him. He realized that his prior actions and disrespect had consequences he couldn't avoid. Margaret didn't need to yell or berate. The evidence, her success, and his public exposure spoke volumes. His confidence had crumbled into guilt and humility, leaving him to reflect on the years he had wasted undervaluing his mother. Margaret allowed him to feel the weight of his arrogance while maintaining her dignity, turning the confrontation into a lesson about accountability and respect. Every subtle glance and measured word reinforced her authority and independence. By the end, Brandon's ego was humbled, and he understood that empowerment, skill, and resilience could never be overshadowed by entitlement or cruelty. Margaret had transformed past betrayal into a masterclass of justice. With the confrontation complete, Margaret stood amid applause and admiration from her staff, guests, and media. She felt a wave of relief and exhilaration. The humiliation she endured had been transformed into a complete triumph. Her empire was thriving, her independence secure, and her authority recognized by all present. Margaret reflected on the journey. Betrayal, loss, determination, and strategy had led her to this moment of empowerment. The room celebrated not just her business success, but her resilience, composure, and intelligence. Looking at Brandon, she felt satisfaction, not from revenge, but from justice and fulfillment. Margaret had reclaimed her power, proven her worth, and built a legacy untouchable by arrogance or disrespect. This day marked the final chapter of humiliation turned into triumph, a cinematic and dramatic conclusion to a story of resilience, strategy, and unwavering self belief.